Hey, Stephen Michael here. Coming up is episode 12 of the Aspiecast. This is just a little preface to say that there's some sensitive topics and maybe young kids shouldn't be listening to this episode. Leave it up to the folks listening to use their own discretion. The main topic here is just a little bit more detail about the first time I was involved in a sexual assault. Basically, the summary of the episode, in case you don't want to listen to it, is just that for me, I had no clue what to do in a very bizarre, unusual, and unethical, incorrect, strange situation. So all I could do was sort of freeze. And there's a little more detail coming up, but just wanted to put this little preface in there. So if you have kids around, you may want to think about whether they should hear this, or if you have sensitivities about this kind of thing. Okay, here goes. Hi, welcome to episode 12 of the Aspiecast. I'm Stephen Michael, and this is a podcast to sort of document, talk about the experiences of one person, me, who's now 52, and what it's like to be functioning as a 52-year-old who's grown up having all the issues that Asperger's can result in from day one. And also, I think, having Aspie parents. So it's interesting because a lot of parents out there probably are not Aspie people, but or maybe one out of the two parents is, but the Aspie offspring have some guidance or some visibility into the ideas that some of the stuff they do or their behaviors are not conducive to social interaction and progress that comes from social interaction. And in my case, I think both parents are Aspies, and therefore the frame of reference that they had, and by the way, I mean, they're old enough that they wouldn't have been diagnosed because there was no such awareness in general at the time that it would have helped them. But the result is they had no frame of reference to even think that I was socially awkward. And the only indication to me was just seeing a pattern which took, a couple decades to figure out, of people getting mad at me and friends leaving and all that, which I've sort of detailed in other episodes. In this episode, I want to just go over some stuff that I never wanted to talk about. And I had alluded to it in a couple previous episodes early on, which is sexual assault. And what I've heard or read or something is that Aspies are more susceptible to sexual assault than other folks. And it makes sense to me because you don't necessarily know what the right thing to do is in a lot of situations. I mean, I see this before. Aspies may not just have a default understanding of, the right way to approach any situation or react to a situation that hasn't occurred before. So there's no, pre-planned, reaction mode. So that, to me, makes sense why Aspies would be more susceptible to sexual assault, because there's no knowledge of what's the right thing to do to get out of it. And sexual assault can take many forms. And obviously the worst kind is aggressive, violent, forced, but there's plenty of sort of gray area sexual assaults of which I've been, exposed to, unfortunately. And I'm sure many other Aspies have, that, that wouldn't have happened if there was a known situation to get out of them. or in my case, wouldn't have happened if I wasn't trying to struggle with how to be social and not depend on alcohol to keep me socially functional to some degree. And I say to some degree only because even when I was having alcohol, people didn't like me because I was a little too ridiculous, I guess, unbeknownst to me. So real quick, I had two situations that occurred. So one is I used to do a lot of restaurant marketing, that is to say, digital marketing for restaurants, and digital marketing is sort of a new term used by people in the online marketing world, so people that do websites or social media stuff for a business, email broadcasts or email blasts and all that kind of stuff. Anything that uses the internet to help a business market themselves online, I think is now called digital marketing. And I think the term has only been used widely for 1 to 2 years, actually. It's now 2017 March for those folks listening in the future. Anyway, so one of the well, let me back up. One of the things that happened to me is I got some kind of good word of mouth exposure to restaurants that needed digital marketing 10 years ago onward. And unfortunately, these were folks that I felt very lucky to be working with because I had never been sort of respected as a knowledgeable person, or at least didn't have the confidence about being respected as a talented person in my field. So I ended up working with some folks that were restaurant owners, but also not the most respectable human beings. And what's interesting, I've noticed, and this is true for these restaurant owners, is that they are connected with and hire and work with folks that are also not the most respectable human beings. Now, some of them obviously are, but you'll end up finding that employees that get hired by restaurant owners that are on, less ethical. Sometimes those employees are less ethical. So by less ethical, I mean, doing things that don't respect the customer. So if food drops on the floor, they'll throw it back on the plate because they don't care about the customer's health as much as they care about making sure they don't waste money, since food for them is money. And they don't want to, take something that was just an honest loss, or excuse me, an honest accident that would result in a dollar loss. They'll throw it on the plate and not do anything. I mean, that's the kind of stuff I would see on a regular basis. And when the owner does it, the employees feel like they're supposed to do it, or they get yelled at if they don't do it. So if the employee drops something on the floor, food-wise, and they don't put it back on the plate and serve the customer, then maybe they get in trouble with the owner who's obviously not ethical. So these are the kind of folks I worked with and worked around. Okay. And so in one case, an owner, well, the other thing is I was so wussy about asking for money because I didn't really value myself as much compared to probably most people with my talents, I would sort of accept the fact that the owners would ply me with wine or whatever you call it. And I accepted that as a legitimate amount of money they were spending on me, and also the food. But, the wine was a big deal to me. I found that to be, a value that I appreciated, and they realized they could, give to me in lieu of actual money in a lot of cases. Some money had to come through, but anyway, they knew that wine would satisfy me. So I, unfortunately, that was part of the reason I think I got more addicted than other people. And it turns out in the food and beverage industry, alcoholism ends up being a result a lot of the time because of freer access to the alcohol. So that covered me. Anyway, so one of these fairly unethical business owners, who was constantly trying to get people to work for him for free and or work for him and promise payment over time that he never followed up on. Anyway, he would hire people of really not such good quality. So one guy came along and was great and proved that he was a good chef, all within a few hours, maybe 6 hours. And in all this stuff, there was a lot of quick and fast familiarity being developed between me and the restaurant owner and this new guy. And the new guy was from the same culture as the restaurant owner. The strange thing was, so the new guy started getting, drinking a lot and in the middle of also showing his cooking skills, and that was great. And then the restaurant owner decided he had to go home, but he left me and this new potential chef, who was very eloquent, very, very adept, very affable. Left me and this chef in the restaurant, told us to lock up. So that was fine. Trouble is, as soon as the restaurant owner left, the chef, and I guess the door was shut and all that, and closed the restaurant down. And the chef all of a sudden is standing up, and a certain something was pointed straight out of his pants. And I had no frickin' clue why would that happen? What the hell was going on? The guy was just talking about food and having a blast drinking. And then all of a sudden his zipper's down and something's sticking straight out. Oh my gosh. So I didn't know what to do. What the hell do you do in that case? You're in the client's business, my client being the restaurant owner, plastered though I may have been, and super plastered though he may have been. What the hell do you do? So he was starting to talk to me, and he's like, don't tell anybody, this is what I am or who I am, whatever. He was highly aroused, started bragging about himself, from his physical attributes, if you can imagine what I'm saying. And so what I did, I just went into the dining room, which is sort of behind a wall from the main area where we had been chatting and drinking. Went in there and just sort of tried to go to sleep and or pretend I was going to sleep. Next thing I know, this guy climbs on top of me, and I didn't know what the hell to do. So I just sort of chose to be in frozen mode because I didn't know what to do. I just chose to sit there, had no clue and no previous experience that would tell me how to say, get the hell off of me, you crazy nut job. What the hell? So he pulls up my shirt. I'm lying down. He pulls up my shirt, and next thing you know, I've got hot yogurt all over my back. And I don't mean yogurt. Okay. Really freaking bizarre. And so it was crazy. So I think I just went to sleep there. I think the guy did wipe me up. Crazy. And then he's like, don't tell anybody this and blah, blah, blah. And then I woke up in the morning and he was in the other room, and it was really also bizarre because he had all sorts of belongings with him, like toothbrush, toothpaste, and all this stuff. So I realized he was probably homeless, in addition to, convincing the owner of this restaurant the night before that he was a really good chef, which he seemed to be. It just so much confusing stuff, and I needed to get out of the restaurant but not leave him in there, because then I would be, looking bad for leaving some fairly new stranger in the restaurant. Who knows what he's going to do. So I made sure the guy would leave when I left, and But I ended up giving him a ride back to some place where he needed to go, a couple miles away. And I hated that. I mean, I had to sit there and interact with this guy that just, yogurted all over me. God, it was just too bizarre, and I didn't know, what the hell else to do. I mean, I think at this point I would have enough understanding of boundaries to be able to say, get the hell off of here, get out, whatever. Put it back in. So really bizarre. So I'm mentioning this. I don't know why I'm mentioning this, but just in part because I had mentioned sexual assault, and there's another episode, another event that occurred some years after that, again related to alcohol on my part, which I'll probably mention in another episode, but it was more directly related to me drinking and me interacting with somebody who was also quite off kilter. So I'll probably have to mention that in another episode. But basically, I guess the summary is, I was always looking for, various social situations to where I'd feel like people wanted to be around me, or I was somehow slightly important, or could participate without being ashamed, or without being accused of doing stuff that's inappropriate. Come to find out, the only situations that I got myself into where that was possible was with some people that were quite off kilter, and in the case that I'm talking about here, restaurant owner who ended up bringing in some other guy fairly randomly, and I don't know if the guy was off the street or just came. I don't know where this guy came from, but and he was sort of older. God, he might have been 55 or something. I might have been 45. Not that that really matters, but there was this assumption on my part that the guy was sort of a respectable, mature chef or something. So everything just changed 180 degrees after the restaurant owner left. And there I am stuck in this restaurant, closed down, doors closed, whatever. And, just really bizarre situation. No idea what I was supposed to do. No idea what the right thing to do was. And no training, no frame of reference, no understanding what the boundary would be, no confidence that I would be okay telling the guy to get the hell out, which obviously in the back of my mind, not in the back of the front of my mind, was probably needed, but I basically just chose to freeze. And anyway, it just sort of, that was a good thing because it didn't get super scary, violent, whatever. I mean, he was a bigger guy, and I didn't have the opportunity to sort of crawl out from under him because he was a bigger guy and all that. But and I was just sort of, trying to go to sleep on a bench seat, if that makes sense, next to a table, in the dining area. Anyways, that's one of my bizarre things. And again, the only point I'm trying to mention is that, I don't know why there was nothing inside me to know what to do. I definitely, obviously, had not been had my boundaries violated in that fashion before, and I knew that it wasn't something I wanted, but I had no clue what to do, and I had no clue that I had any legitimate right, if that makes sense, to aggressively repel this nut job. So, end result, the guy got fired after a couple of days. I didn't really know how to tell the owner that he had just hired a chef, and he did need a chef. I think he needed a chef urgently, but I didn't know how to tell him that he just hired a chef who did what he did, and I think I told one of the coworkers or one of the other employees, not the owner, about it. But anyway, the guy turned out to be more of a nut job, even beyond what he did to me. I mean, he showed the owner that he wasn't quite all there in some fashion, presumably not the same fashion he showed me. But anyway, that was the scoop. So I didn't really have to see him ever again after the one night in the morning, driving him back to some place that I don't remember. And I dropped him off. So anyway, I probably will in a future episode talk about the second event that was a little more scary, but which also had to do with me having way too much alcohol because the alcohol was free. And that one was one where it was kind of more scary and I didn't know what to do. And again, I did just sort of freeze, not knowing what to do. Anyway, so that's the scoop on that. Gosh, I don't know what else to say on this one, so I'm going to keep it short and hopefully pump out some more of these episodes as I get time and energy and whatnot. So thanks a lot for listening, and I'll catch you on the next one. Thanks.